Okay, class, lecture number 22. We're almost through this course. We only have 4 remaining lectures after today. Let's have a quick refresher on what we went over the last time we were together. We were talking about World War II. I mentioned to you a couple of treaties, pacts, if you will, there. A Locarno Agreement, a Treaty over Apollo. One I really want you to know is that of the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which outlawed war as an instrument of national policy forever and forever. 62 nations signed that too. All right, we also talked about the Spanish Civil War. I mentioned to you about the incident that took place with Japan and their rape of Nanjing, and the United States was trying to evacuate our diplomats from there and their families and dependents, and that situation took place, if you will, in 1937, December the 12th, with the Panay. USS Panay was sunk by Japanese aviators. By all rights, we should have gone to war with Japan at that time. Somewhere we talked through here, we talked about the Anschluss. This is Adolf Hitler expanding. I'll quit rocking around in front of you in just a second here. Adolf Hitler annexing Austria. All right, you need to recognize that. Then we talked about the Munich Conference. And in the Munich Conference, where Adolf Hitler demanded the Sudetenland. If you'll give me Sudetenland, I have no further territorial conquest in Europe. All right, and that was done. And 6 months later, Adolf Hitler and the Wehrmacht took Czechoslovakia. And we also talked about Poland. Invasion of Poland, September the 1st, 1939. Blitzkrieg, this was your first exposure to this word in this course anyway. All right, and we also talked about, the invasion, if you will, of Norway and Denmark and the Netherlands, and then also France. France will fall in 6 weeks. All right, we closed out the class period there with Dunkirk. All right, so by all logic, it looks like the next place that Adolf Hitler will attack is that of Great Britain. Now, by this time, Great Britain has another prime minister. It is not Neville Chamberlain, peace in our time. This individual's name is Winston Churchill, one of my favorite individuals. And I'll give you some quotations about Winston Churchill, by Winston Churchill, in just a little bit. So anyway, let's begin here with the proposed invasion of Great Britain. Operation Sea Lion is what it is known as. If we put that in German, it's Operation Seelove, which I don't hold you responsible for that. I do want you to know that of the Anschluss. You got to know that anyway. Now, for Germany to be successful in this, they must first have air superiority. And they really don't have air superiority right at the start of this conflict. So where we're going to carry ourselves here, folks, is a summer, if you will, 1940, and we're going to continue this for about 6 months in what is called the Battle of Britain. Some people refer to it as the Blitz. But let me go off of me for a second and let you catch up with your notes here. And like I said, the Prime Minister of Great Britain is Winston Churchill. The invasion of Great Britain is Operation Sea Lion, is what it is known as. And it really is not going to take place as far as a land invasion. But as I told you a few seconds ago, for the Germans must establish air superiority with their Luftwaffe. And Luftwaffe is the German Air Force. All right, and begins the Battle of Britain. I wrote the dates here for you for about August of 1940. I think I might have told you July, but August 1940 to June of 1941. This is known as the Blitz. Here's the German name here of Air Force, which is Luftwaffe, and then we have the British Royal Air Force, which is called the RAF. All right, and for the British will lose about 40,000 individuals in this Blitz. Almost all of the large cities in the United Kingdom and even smaller cities will be bombed by the Germans. In the aftermath of this, we'll see such photographs as what you're seeing right here. This is in London, and that is typically what you would see after one of these German air raids bombing the cities here. One of my friends, by the way, and he was 85 years of age, and at the time that they had the Blitz, he was 6 years of age, and he describes it as follows. And I will tell you that at one point he was a running friend of mine. He's a very good runner. In fact, he set the Alabama 5-mile record for his age group. So he's not a hacker. He doesn't run now, but he did run. And often when we would run, he would make a comment as an airplane was flying over. He would say, "Is it one of ours?" in his Scottish accent, and he would look over his shoulder and up into the skies, and he would say, "It is one of ours." But he would tell me about this, how he and all the other kids at that time could recognize the sound of a German engine on an airplane or a British engine, so they could recognize. And he would say, well, we would hear the Germans, bombers come in, 20 miles before they actually arrived in Glasgow, Scotland, and then we would hear them getting closer and closer, and finally the air raid sirens would blow, and we would go down into the shelters there, and we would hear the bombs coming down, boom, 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 and just leveling the city of Glasgow. And he said it was hugely exciting with that, the eerie orange lights. And he said, after the all clear was blown, siren was blown, we would go up to into the cities, the doors would open, we'd go into the city, and it would be like I showed you the photograph there of London there. I wish I could bring him in and let him talk to you good folks here, but I cannot trust that he would arrive sober. In fact, I can trust that he will not arrive sober here. And he has just a foulness of language, as all people in the United Kingdom do, particularly that of males. You don't believe me? You go there. Don't try to correct anybody anyway, or you'll be shown the error of your ways. All right, so let's go back to our photograph, to our camera here. This is the Battle of the Bulge. I still want to give you those quotations here by Winston Churchill. And in fact, I think I'll do that right now. And I'll show you a likeness here of Winston Churchill. And following the Dunkirk evacuation, one of his quotations was, "War is not won by evacuation. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer that in one word. It is victory here. Never in the field of human conflict has so many owed so much to so few," talking about the RAF. "We shall defend our island, whatever the cost might be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Winston Churchill. Now, my friend I was telling you about a few minutes ago, is 85 years of age. He doesn't share my fondness for Winston Churchill. All right, so let's move on here. And also as a part of this in the Blitz, the Germans used several types of rockets, if you will. They had one that was called a V1 buzz bomb. It did not fly very fast. It was just like a bomb that had an engine on it. And then they also made use of the V2 rockets. Now, these were actually rockets, and one of the principal designers was that of Wernher von Braun. Some of you probably have been to Huntsville. You see the von Braun Civic Center there, the von Braun Towers, whatever. But he was a German rocket scientist, and after the war, we took possession of him. We actually forced him to come to the United States to work on our own rocket program. Interesting individual, and I like him very, very much. And if you spend any time around Huntsville, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's move on here. And so, never fell. Great Britain just never fell. And so Hitler will cancel that, and he will go to something else, but I'll get to that in just a minute. In the meantime, for the United States, we will begin to provide what is called Lend-Lease through the Lend-Lease Act here. And we will give war materials to our friends, for countries that are deemed to be of vital interest to the free world and to the United States, such as Great Britain and even the Soviet Union. We will provide them with, lend them war materials, or we will lease them war materials. In the meantime, Germans invaded the Balkans. Now, the Balkans would include such places as Yugoslavia. That would be the principal one. Yugoslavia is where Serbia is located today. The Germans would also take over Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, in addition to Yugoslavia. So what did the Italians do under Mussolini? And for the Italians, they will invade Greece, they will invade North Africa, and you'll find there in those places here that the Italians are not the Germans, and the Italians will struggle with this in Greece, and particularly in North Africa. All right, and that's against the British there in North Africa. Shall we move right along? And then we're going to find that Adolf Hitler makes the worst mistake in his life. Adolf Hitler will invade the Soviet Union. This will take place on the 22nd of June in 1941 in what is known as Operation Red Beard. Operation Red Beard. That is Operation Barbarossa, which translates to mean Red Beard. I'd like you to recognize that term, Barbarossa, or Red Beard is what it is known as. This plan was originally supposed to get started in April, but it did not. It was delayed until the 22nd of June primarily because German troops had to bail out Mussolini's forces. They had to come in and provide assistance to Mussolini. Wait a minute. I thought Hitler and Joseph Stalin from the Soviet Union had a secret non-aggression pact. Well, they did have that non-aggression pact. As you can see, who do we not trust? You cannot trust Adolf Hitler. And for these Germans, the Germans are going, it's blitzkrieg, my friends, and the Germans are just going to be rolling across the Soviet Union, Russia, if you will. Okay, here, Germany invades the USSR. And I'll show you, I want to go back to my map here and show you the advance that they made. Let's get our lighting right here. And the advance that they actually made. And I'll use my map here if we can see this. And I wish I was in class with you so I could show you some maps that are closer to you. So you just kind of have to use your imagination with this. Now, where the Germans invade from, they're coming out of Poland. The Germans will invade here in 3 lines. They'll have a northern group, and this northern group, which will go all the way up here to Leningrad. That's where St. Petersburg was, but they changed the name here. Leningrad, that means Lenin City. Lenin City, I told you ever see the Russian word Grad, it means city. And they will lay siege to Leningrad for 900 days. But Leningrad never falls. It never falls here. And then a second element will go through the center all the way up to where Moscow is. You pronounce it as Moscow. And we'll get as close to Moscow as you can actually see the buildings. You can see the buildings in Moscow itself, but they were stopped about 5 miles away. And the third group will go to the south, down in the Caucasus region, down through this area here. So let me show you something here with some photographs. These are actual photographs from that time. Here's a German soldier that's present in the Soviet Union. And at first the Germans were well received. The Germans were, you got to remember, Stalin was responsible for 9 million Russian deaths. And so the Germans were held as liberators at first anyway. But what the Soviets, the Russian people, soon found out that these Germans were bringing in these special assassination teams. They were called the Einsatzgruppen. And they would go into a Russian settlement. There would be no Russian men in there except the elderly men, but you would have women and children and elderly women. And these Einsatzgruppen would actually kill the women and children. This shot, it doesn't show you the shot, but the actual shot here killed the woman and the baby all in one shot there. And that will turn these Russian people against the Germans. This is the aftermath showing you the Einsatzgruppen as they're going to travel through the western parts of the Soviet Union. All right, so I want to ask you here, why was this German advance halted? Well, that's an easy answer to that. Have we all heard of General Winter before? General Winter? Well, when this Operation Barbarossa began, it was in June. It's beautiful weather in Europe in June. It was supposed to have begun in April, but there were 6 weeks that they were delayed. And we had nice weather, moving across the Soviet Union, Russia here, for the summer months. But then June became July, July became August, and August became September, and the days started getting cold here. And sure enough, by October, we have, if it's not raining, it is snowing, and freezing conditions here. And by the time they got up to where Leningrad and Moscow it was just winter had set in at that point. And it was so cold, literally batteries just exploded in the battery box at there. And as you well know, your vehicles don't run without a battery. So that just put a halt to the German advance. Historians have argued, if the Operation Barbarossa had started in April, would the Germans have been successful? I don't know. You have to just be your own little armchair general to figure that out. All right, so let's go back to our camera here, and let's see where else we need to proceed. Okay, so the invasion took place. And we will likewise find that many of these Russians, along with the Slavs elsewhere, will be taken as prisoners and will serve as slave laborers for Nazi Germany. All right, I want to move on to another place. And let's go to the other side of the world and mention to you about Japan. Japan signed a tripartite pact, and this was done in 1940. They signed this with Germany and Italy. Hitler made a statement of this time. He said, now it's impossible for us to not have victory. Japan has not been vanquished in 2,000 years. We cannot lose. All right. In summer 1941, Japan invades French Indochina. That's where Vietnam is located. I don't want to go back to my a map here, but imagine in your mind here, south of where China is located, where Laos and Cambodia and Thailand and Vietnam is placed there. And Japan will take over that area in just a matter of weeks. The United States, we're going to spend a long time in Vietnam and not be successful, but Japan was in a matter of a couple of weeks. In response to this, the United States placed an oil and steel embargo on Japan. We would not export oil, not export steel to them. And Japan, it was an imperial nation, so Japan had to have these products. This oil, they had to have steel, and we know for sure, and Japan knows, that there is an oil supply which is down in the Dutch East Indies, down where Malaysia is located. And we knew that they were going to attack. And the reason that we knew this, we were using magic. Magic is code word for JN25. We have broken the Japanese code. And we likewise know that the Japanese will attack a United States installation. Not really sure where this is, but there's some suspicion that it might be in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor. And sure enough here, my friends, on the 7th of December, Sunday morning, 1941, 7:55 a.m., the Japanese launched Tora Tora. This will be the invasion, if you will, of our naval air station, our naval facility at Pearl Harbor on the island of Oahu in Honolulu. Let's see if I wrote this down, if you will. All right, so you can kind of catch up with me. It's a neat place to visit. The Japanese launched, if you will, 181 aircraft, 6 aircraft carriers came in 2 waves. You can go there today if you wish to do so. And ultimately, the United States, we lost, we were totally unprepared for this. We lost 8 battleships, 3 cruisers, 4 destroyers, 186 aircraft, 2,358 soldiers and sailors lost their lives here in this sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. All right, I want to share some photographs with you, class. If you were in class with me, I would have some very large photographs. They're probably about 14 by 16 in size. But I can't get those under my camera, so I'll have to use some of these smaller photographs. This is on the Japanese aircraft carrier Akagi, and it's one of the 181 aircraft that will be launched off of the 6 Japanese aircraft carriers. Our ships at Ford Island, our ships in Honolulu at Pearl Harbor, they were in battleship row, just like this. They were not dispersed at that time. If we had more time, if you take my U.S. history class, I identify all these ships for you. We had Vestal. The Vestal is here. The Arizona and the Nevada. Oops, I'm moving in the wrong direction. Or back here. We had the West Virginia and the Tennessee that's here. The Oklahoma is back here, and so forth and so forth. All right, now if you visit there today, where the visitor center is, for the Pearl Harbor Visitor Center, it is over in this area here, right in this area. All right, now I'll show you more on that in just a few minutes. Some more photographs of the Japanese attack here. That's a different view. This is taken from a Japanese aircraft. If you look right in this area here, this is the Oklahoma. And see the geyser? Now, the Oklahoma took a bomb, a large bomb, I don't know, 500-pound, 1,000-pound bomb, and it just went right through the hull of the Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma just flipped over. It just went over in the water. I don't need to tell you what happened to the sailors that are in the Oklahoma, and the vast majority of them just got a watery grave. All right, some more photographs here. This shows you, this is the Tennessee and the West Virginia. They have been hit by Japanese torpedo bombers. We had dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and the Japanese also had fighters. And let's see here. Here is another photograph, and this is the USS California being struck by the Japanese. All right, if you go there today, you'll find there are markers there that show you the position of where all of our ships were. This is the Arizona. Nevada's in the foreground. That's the Arizona that's in the background there. The Arizona likewise took a direct hit, but it didn't roll over. The Arizona just went straight down. It just went straight to the bottom. The water was shallow enough to where the Oklahoma did not completely submerge, but the main part of the ship did go underwater. And, of course, again, you know what happens to the sailors that are there. They are trapped. And today, when you go to Pearl Harbor, you'll find that that is still the watery grave, you know, for many of those sailors there that were unfortunate enough to be on the Arizona. Let's get this back up here. And more photographs. Here's the Arizona. And like I said, it didn't roll over. It just went down. Later, that top section will be cut away. We were able to salvage most of the battleships. I think 3 were not able to be salvaged. Arizona was one, Oklahoma was another. Here's another photograph of the Arizona. And that's the Arizona as it left California. This is before all the bad stuff took place, before the attack on Pearl Harbor. This in the background showing you the USS Shaw. The Shaw exploded. Of course, it was sunk. And this photograph, you have to look carefully at this. There are 2 ships that are closest to you. That's the Downs and the Cassine. The one in the back, miraculously, the Pennsylvania, was mostly unharmed. And so I don't know. It was just a stroke of luck there. There we go. The Japanese also attacked Hickam Field, Naval Air Station there. We lost 186 aircraft. Our aircraft were lined up wingtip to wingtip for the most part. All right. And that was it. That was it for those. Now, if you visit there today, it's very solemn, by the way, but if you visit there today, be sure and take the time to go by the Pearl Harbor Visitor Center. Don't be surprised here, class. You will find as many Japanese present there as you will find Americans there. A lot of people go there. And that's kind of weird at first because, you're standing there side by side with a person that is Japanese on your left and a person Japanese on your right. And you think, whoa, this is kind of odd there, and I'm sure that they are doing the same thing as they're looking around and there's an American on their left and an American on their right. The United States Navy is gracious to provide you with transportation out of the Visitor Center. You can see the boat right here. It will hold about 50 or 60 passengers, and they will transport you free of charge and transport you over to the Arizona. Now, see the Arizona? Can you see it? It's still present there today. This is a forward gun turret, which is present right there, and it was just cut away from the main part of the ship. This indicates where other ships were located, such as the Nevada, located there. Now, the memorial that spans over the Arizona is very solemn. It's like a religious site. It has the names of the 2,338 soldiers or sailors, some of those anyway, that lost their lives there. And soldiers lost their lives, but not on the Arizona anyway. Here's another likeness here. Let me get it positioned properly. That's another likeness there. And it's interesting to visit there. All right, I'm trying to find one other photograph. And one thing I remember so much about that is the overwhelming smell of engine oil. Engine oil. And the Arizona to this very day, from 1941, is still leaking oil. And one of my students took this photograph. And what you see here, you can see a droplet, and I'm talking about a droplet, and it's not really a droplet, it's the size of a softball of oil, and you can see it down below the surface, and you can see it coming up to the surface itself, and when it reaches the surface, it pops, and that's where we get this overwhelming smell of engine oil. And one of my students a few years ago had her camera with her, and she was waiting for this, and here came the drop, or the ball of oil to the surface, and she took the photograph right at the direct moment that the oil droplet actually burst there. Okay, so anyway, so that's Pearl Harbor for you. All right, so this is going to initiate a war with Japan. On the 8th of December 1941, the United States declared war on Japan, and a date that will live in infamy. And 3 days later, on the 8th of December, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. So we're in it here, folks, and we are fighting a two-front war, a Pacific theater of operations and a European theater of operations. Within 10 days, Japanese attacked the airfield, Clark Field, which is located in the Philippines. Unfortunately, we had our aircraft that were lined up there, wingtip to wingtip. Absolutely inexcusable. Within 24 hours, Japan landed their military forces in the Philippines here. Shortly after that, I don't think I wrote it down here. Yeah, I did. It's down at the bottom here. Japan, within the next few days, will take Guam, Wake Island. Those were U.S. possessions. They would take Hong Kong, which was British possession. Singapore, 30,000 British were surrendered to the Japanese. They had a force 1/3 of that size. The Japanese will take Burma and most of the islands that are present there in the Pacific. In the Philippines, for the Americans that were present there and for the Filipinos, and there was a large number of Filipinos in their army, about 50,000, they were pushed all the way back to the tip of an island to a place which is called Bataan. And that's where the Americans surrendered. General Douglas MacArthur was evacuated out of Corregidor. He'd been living in a bunker with his son and wife, and they were evacuated on a PT boat along with a caretaker for the family, when you could have had Americans that could have been evacuated too. That just did not happen. And MacArthur picked up the nickname Dugout Doug. He abandoned his troops there, folks, went to Australia and had a press conference and announced that I came through and I shall return. The unfortunate thing were those individuals that were left behind. And for those individuals, including my cousin here, they will now have to participate, engage in what is called the Bataan Death March. And we marched 65 miles, and we ended up losing several hundred Americans, about 600 Americans, and I forget, well into the thousands of the Filipinos. Anybody that stumbled, anybody that tried to secretly get some water or food, from a Filipino as you pass through a village, you would be either shot or bayoneted. Here's a photograph here, When Men Must Die, an Alabama POW at the Bataan, on the Bataan Death March here. And my cousin, who is not living today, but he lived to be about 90 or something on that order anyway, was sent to a Japanese prisoner of war camp at Mukden. That's up in China itself, and that's where he spent the duration of the war. Some of you probably seen the movie Unbroken with Louis Zamperini. Well, that's what my cousin went through. It was awful, awful. Okay, so anyway, the United States developed two plans in the Pacific, and I should say Great Britain would help us a little bit there, but largely the United States, we were on our own. The first of these two plans would involve General MacArthur to take his military forces and go from Australia to New Guinea to the Philippines. Remember what MacArthur said, I shall return. Well, MacArthur had been promoted to 5-star general, given the Medal of Honor. Woo, I don't know about that. You got to give you something to do. And the second plan, which was island hopping. And under the island hopping, I didn't even put the name. This is under the direction there of Chester Nimitz, Admiral Chester Nimitz. All right, and that would be just literally hopping from island to island to island. Well, one of the things we needed so desperately was a shot in the arm. In the Pacific, it was not a matter of winning. It was just a matter of trying to prolong defeat. And one of the things that we did here, we initiated a raid. And this was through the use of 16 B-25 bombers. They're called Mitchells, by the way. And we're going to launch those from an aircraft carrier, which is called the Hornet. The commander was Jimmy Doolittle. Jimmy Doolittle, he was a colonel at that time. And it was a one-way mission. We were not coming back. It would be a miracle if you even got those bombers launched off an aircraft carrier. But oddly enough, we got all 16 launched and on a one-way mission to fly over Japan and bomb Japan the best we could. And then crash land in the sea or either go on to China. And one of the planes actually landed in the Soviet Union there. But anyway, gave us a little morale booster. All right, now the Japanese were attempting to punish us for doing that. We had a large naval facility at Midway Island. So the Japanese planned to take Midway Island, and in June of 1942 they attempted to do so. Just the other day I watched the movie Midway. It's a wonderful movie, by the way. I recommend that to you, the 2019 version, Midway. And we were fortunate enough, I could make it a long story, but I'm not, but we ended up destroying 324 Japanese airplanes. When did I write here? Japanese aircraft destroyed. And we also sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. You asked me, and you didn't ask me, but if you asked me, I think this was a turning point in the Pacific at Midway. And from that point, we're going to begin this island hopping. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'll go back to me for just a second, and we'll try to use the map over here of the Pacific Theater of Operations. We're going to get started. Remember, the island hopping is going to come under Chester Nimitz. And we're going to start over here in the Gilbert Islands here at Tarawa. You can't see that. Trust me here. That's where it is. Over here in Tarawa, we're going to make our way up here to the Marshall Islands where Kwajalein and Inuiatak are located. We'll move on over here to where Saipan is located and the Marianas there. We retake Wake Island. And Peleliu, which is down here, is very bloody fighting for the president there. That's island hopping. We're moving on. And we finally end up, it's not on the map here, but it's right here at a place which is called Iwo Jima. And our Marines went ashore. It was so unusual because prior to this, whenever we launched an invasion on a Japanese-held island, the Japanese would always meet us on the beaches. But when we got to Iwo Jima, There were no Japanese. We knew they were there. We just couldn't find them. Well, there's a large hill there, which is called Mount Suribachi. It's just peaks. It just goes up like this. And that's where we knew the Japanese were. So we sent our Marines up Mount Suribachi, and we weren't sure whether they would be successful or not. And then all of a sudden, a lookout on one of the ships that had brought the Marines in yelled to his skipper. He said, "Get your binoculars, skipper, and look up to the top of Mount Suribachi." And sure enough, there was an American flag that was flying there. 6 Marines had hoisted an American flag. You probably know what I'm talking about. If you watched the movie here, Flags of Our Fathers, read the book Flags of Our Fathers, you're familiar with this, you know. And those Marines raising the flag on Mount Suribachi, that is our logo, our symbol for the United States Marine Corps today. If you go to Arlington National Cemetery, you find a huge monument that is dedicated to that. Let's go a little bit further, and let's move on to what is called Okinawa. At Okinawa, we're going to lose 50,000 soldiers and sailors, and as many sailors as we did soldiers, because here the Japanese made use of kamikaze pilots. You know what I'm talking about with that? Those are suicide bombers that will fly right into a ship, take their own life, but you sink a ship, preferably an aircraft carrier, maybe a battleship, maybe a destroyer, cruiser, whatever. If you've watched the movie Hacksaw Ridge, that was one of the engagements that actually took place there at Okinawa. A real bloodbath. All right, I want to go back to my camera, let you write a few words here, and take some notes on this. Those places that I just mentioned there, I'm not going to hold you responsible for these. Tarawa, Inuitak, Kwajalein, Saipan, Peleliu, and then we had Iwo Jima with Mount Suribachi, Okinawa. Okinawa was only 290 miles away from Japan, so when we were successful with Okinawa, we could now establish airstrips and we could bomb Japan at will if we wished to do so. All right, so what we plan to do here, we came up with two objectives, and the first one of these is called Operation Olympic. Operation Olympic was designed to take place in November of 1945, and this would be the attack of Kyushu. Now, Kyushu is the southernmost island on Japan. I'm not going to show you a map of Japan today. During our next lecture, I'll have a large map of Japan, and I'll show you precisely where Kyushu is. It is the southernmost island in Japan. And this would be followed by Operation Coronet. Operation Coronet that would take place the following March in 1946 with the invasion of Honshu. And this is the main island in Japan. It's where Tokyo and Kyoto are located. And both of those were planned for the next year. All right, now it was projected. This is based on the casualty figures of what we had at Peleliu and Saipan and the other places there, and Iwo Jima and Okinawa, that the United States would experience 1 million American casualties here. So I'm asking you a question here, and I'm not going to go into this today, but I'm asking you a question. If we in the United States could develop a miracle weapon of mass destruction that would end this war in a day, would you be willing to use that weapon over Japan? Would you be willing to do so? Or would you be more likely to allow 1 million American casualties to take place with a land invasion of Kyushu and Honshu? I don't know what your decision is, but I know what my decision is. I would use that weapon of mass destruction. But I'm not going to go into that today. We'll wait until our next class period. All right, so back we go here, folks. And we'll change our subject a little bit, and we're going to leave Japan, and let's move over to North Africa. All right, so really what happens at this time when the United States gets involved in the war in Europe, or if you want to call it in Africa, FDR, the President of the United States, and also Joseph Stalin, wanted to have a cross-channel invasion in the spring of 1943. Personally, I think we were too premature on this. For the Germans have been at war for a couple of years, since 1939. By this time, it's 1942, and they're very experienced, the Germans are, and I think if the Americans had actually made a cross-channel invasion into France, in 1943, we would have been chewed to pieces here. So we're going to make the decision to get involved in Northern Africa, and the Germans have a quite talented commander there, and we're not going to face him at first. I'm going to go back to myself here, and the British will go against the commander of the Africa Corps, and that's him with his hand held out right there. One of my favorite heroes and one of the best generals that ever lived. He was field marshal here, and his name is Erwin Rommel. Erwin Rommel. I'll spell it for you in just a minute when I go back to my camera here. Those are German soldiers of the Africa Corps. When I lived in Germany, I lived with a German family. They were the age of my parents at that time. And the father, the man, the head of the household, he was part of the Africa Corps, and he'd been captured by Americans, by the way. Just happened to think about that. Here's a couple of photographs showing you a destroyed German vehicle. That's a British vehicle that is behind it. Here's another photograph here showing you some British soldiers that are taking captive some members of the Africa Corps. All right, so anyway, so for the Americans, we get started over in Casablanca. Sorry to leave you there. We're going to make our invasion here with Operation Torch into Casablanca, Algiers, Oran. In the meantime, the British will clash over in the area where Egypt and Libya is located with Rommel's group, and it's a tough time for the British. But fortunately for the British, Rommel was not being resupplied, and all his vehicles that would be destroyed, they were not being replaced. There's also a serious shortage of fuel. And we end up, our opponent's going to be the Vichy French. We have no problems with the Vichy French over in Casablanca and Oran. And eventually we will push the Vichy French to the east, and the British will push Rommel to the west, and we will get our first taste of war with the Germans and against Rommel at a place called Kasserine Pass. And I've got to tell you, folks, we did not do very well, and the Germans bloodied our noses with that. The only bright side that came out of this was that the American commander was relieved of his command, and he was replaced with a person by the name of George Patton. George Patton was an entirely different soldier, and warfare is now going to change. So let's go back to our camera, catch up a little bit, see if there was some things you needed to learn how to spell with that. And here we go. Okay, so the United States, we landed at Casablanca, Algiers, Oran. Our opponent was the Vichy French. And then after this, the next objective, and this went against Stalin's agreement, he was not in favor of this, was for the United States and Great Britain to attack the island of Sicily. Sicily, which is off the coast of northern Africa, but it is also off the coast of Italy. And sure enough, for the Americans and the British, we did go into Sicily. 38 days later, it fell into our hands. Watch the movie Patton. If you watch the movie Patton, it will tell you all about that. Okay, so let's move on here, folks. All right, and next objective is going to be southern Italy. Southern Italy. And what I've attempted to do here is draw Italy for you. You can see Sicily there, and in fact I think it's a pretty good place to go back to my larger map here. Now where Great Britain will attack from is from the foot of Italy, and where the United States will attack from, they're going to go up in this region right here, at a place which is called Salerno. I did not write that on your slide here for you, but we could not have chosen a worse location here for the United States to come ashore. Honestly, I've seen been there before at Salerno, and you have about 50 yards of beach, and then the terrain just goes straight up in the air. But fortunately, it was not defended by Germans or Italians at any great strength. So let me try to show you where this is, and we'll go back to Italy here, and let me get myself oriented on your map, and where the British will enter into Italy is through this area, and where the Americans will enter is right through this area here at Salerno. Not very far from where the Isle of Capri is. Isle of Capri is the way they pronounce it there. Here's Sicily, by the way. Here's Sicily. All right. So anyway, so for the Americans and the British, we were able to move northward a fairly good distance here, and I've drawn the line here in red, and we made our way up here into the Apennines Mountains up to this area here, and the Germans were very well dug in at that area, and I'm convinced that even in the year 2021 we would still be trying to penetrate the Gustav line. It was too heavily defended that it was not going to fall into American hands. So I would ask you at this point, if you were in class, if you can't go over something, you can't go through something, what can you do? Well, you can bypass it. And that's exactly what the Americans did as we launched an amphibious invasion up here at Anzio. I don't think I even wrote the word out for you. And we came in behind the German lines, and that forces them to retreat. Mussolini's government falls apart. Mussolini will be captured and later rescued by a commando squad that Adolf Hitler ordered to rescue him. All right, now finally we're going to see in June 1944, precise date, 6th of June, Operation Overlord. This is D-Day. It will take place in Normandy. This is in France, by the way. We were able to assemble a force here over on England, on English soil. It will consist of 3 million troops here. We had, I think it was 180,000 troops that went to Normandy on day one. We had 11,000 aircraft associated with this, 4,000 ships, 3 airborne divisions. 2 of those airborne divisions were American, and 1 was that of British. Here's a map here that's showing you where the beaches are located. And the beaches down here, a sword and Juno and gold. Gold, by the way, is gold. It honestly is. I ate dinner right there, and I was marveling at, how gold the Gold Beach is. And those were British beaches and Canadian beaches where the Americans went ashore at Omaha Beach here. And we also had over here at Utah Beach present right there. All right, this was mostly Rangers, the 2nd Ranger Battalion, I believe it was anyway. Okay, so I'll show you some photographs here. I'll do it like this, and then we'll go back to some small photographs. This is one that's in your textbook. This is coming ashore at Omaha Beach. That is a Higgins boat, by the way, and the individual that's right there where my finger is, where this finger is anyway, he's a member of the United States Navy. He's the one that's piloting this Higgins boat. And just a few seconds earlier, the ramp of the Higgins boat is up, and it's now dropped, and so these soldiers have got to get ashore as quickly as possible. You have machine gun fire, the mortar fire, there's a 88 millimeter cannon fire, artillery fire, and it's a tough situation to negotiate. You see from the headlines here, the Los Angeles Times, invasion takes place. All right, so I'm going to share some photographs with you. Well, I don't know what I did with my photographs. We'll go back here. All right. And if you visit there, and I hope you will visit there, it's a little out of the way from where Paris is, but if you get a tour, Viking River tour or something like that, you can go out to where the beaches are. You can still see the old bunkers that are present there. Go inside the bunkers and look around, and see what it is from the German perspective. Some of the bunkers are off limits. You cannot get into those, such as this. Some you can. This is a view which is showing you from the German position, where the Americans would be and the British would be down in the surf, down in the ocean there. But you can go up here. There's a big cemetery that's present there of American dead. This is what Omaha Beach looks like. All right. That's dated 2012, by the way. And you can do what many people do and roll your britches legs up and just go out in the surf there for about 50 yards and run ashore and play like you're Saving Private Ryan. You can do that. Okay. Here's a view from the beach looking up at the German high ground. All of this was machine gun and mortars, artillery. And be sure and take the time and go up to the American cemetery at the top. 9,337 Americans are buried there. Very, very solemn, very touching. You cannot walk out where the graves are. You have to stay on the sidewalks there. The 2 brothers of Private Ryan and Saving Private Ryan, are buried there. It's a very good movie. Recommend that. Tom Hanks does an excellent job with that. It takes us a while to get a break out of the Normandy Peninsula, but eventually we do. Paris will be liberated. We are moving quite rapidly across France, on into Belgium, on into Luxembourg, and then in December, middle of December 1944, very cold conditions, a lot of snow, which is present there on the ground. And before I leave that subject entirely, I want to show you something else, and then we'll come back here to the Battle of the Bulge. Be sure, next time you're in New Orleans, if you can tear yourself away from Bourbon Street long enough, take about a day and just spend some time at the National D-Day Museum. It's very, very good. If you would rather go to France, and you can go down to Armance and visit the several museums that are dedicated to D-Day, not just for Americans. Point de Hoc, that's where the Ranger Battalion came ashore there. Enough on that, and let's get back to the Battle of the Bulge. I was looking around for one of my articles here, and the Germans literally caught us very, very underprepared there, and we had some fresh troops into the line, and we were not anticipating this. And when the Germans came across, it's going to result in the Battle of the Bulge there. Interesting movies on that. You can actually go to Bastogne, or Bastogne as you would pronounce it today. There's American Memorial that's present there, and I recommend it. I really do. I tried to depict for you what happened, and bravely enough, the American lines never broke. They never broke. But it did push us back about 60 miles. All the way almost back to where Antwerp is located. The Americans were surrounded here at Bastogne. It's a good story. Watch the movies on this if you wish to do so. But quite frankly here, the Germans just literally ran out of gas. That's exactly what it was. And once they ran out of gas, they had to abandon their vehicles, and the Americans recovered very quickly. The Third Army under General Patton came in, and we restored the situation. And then it was just off to the races here. The Americans had their own little blitzkrieg, and we were pushing quite rapidly here across Germany itself. All right, but politics entered into it, and for the American and the British forces, we were ordered to stop on the Elbe River. We had to stop on the Elbe River. This was allowing the Soviets to catch up, as they are now pushing the Germans back, from the east anyway. And politics played into this, and as a result of this, the Soviet Union was able to capture Prague and Czechoslovakia at that time it was known as, and we're also able to take Berlin. And we made a mistake there. We should have been allowed to take Prague, and Americans and British, and take Berlin, and that would have saved us 45 years of a headache. All right, but I want to go back to my photograph here with me. But finally, the Americans and the Soviets, Americans and the Russians, army actually did meet. We met on the Elbe River, as a matter of fact, at a place which is called Torgau. And here we can see American soldiers there, Soviet soldiers, a lot of toasting, vodka, dancing, if you will, handshaking. You can go to that area today if you wish to do so. The Russians, the Soviets, actually constructed a big monument where the Americans and the Soviets met. That monument it's a Soviet one. It is written in Cyrillic, it's written in Russian, so unless you read a little bit of Russian, you'll have a challenge, in trying to interpret that. All right, and for the Soviets will continue and make their way into Berlin. And this is one of the last photographs that's taken of Adolf Hitler. This is in Berlin, and Adolf Hitler is welcoming new recruits into the army. Anybody see anything unusual about this? Well, the only people that he has to recruit are old men, which are not in the photograph, and these little boys, part of the Hitler Youth. But that's all that remained. For the remainder of the German army, it's virtually all been destroyed. And here we can see in this photograph, be careful, because these individuals that are over, where am I? These individuals that are here, those are not individuals. Here, I can't even see this. These are statues that are present here on top of the German Reichstag. But this is a real Soviet soldier here, and he's planting the Soviet flag, the Russian flag, on top of the German Reichstag. That's the German Parliament building. That building and all the structures have hence been rebuilt. So, in the meantime, for Adolf Hitler, what happens to him? On the 30th of April in 1945, Adolf Hitler and his wife of 40 hours, Eva Braun, they took their lives here. Now, Germans are very, very sensitive about their involvement with the Nazis anyway, in the Third Reich. And I took this photograph in 2006, and the sign here had just been erected. I mean, like just a month earlier than that. This is at a children's playground, and this is where Adolf Hitler's Reichschancellor, where his bunker was, and he was well down in the ground in a bomb-proof shelter, and knowing there's no way out. And so Adolf Hitler and his wife took cyanide capsules, and then Hitler shot himself. He shot himself. I'm not sure. Historians argue this. Did he put the pistol in his mouth, or did he put the pistol barrel to the side of his head? Doesn't really matter. But this is a site where it is. It's children's playground today. All right, and this will lead to Victory in Europe Day. Victory in Europe Day, which is the 7th, or some people argue it is the 8th of May in 1945. All right, so let's go back here and let's catch up here. I want to go back to my camera here. All right. A lot of material here. Anyway, that's pretty much sums up what we were talking about a few minutes ago. I'm looking around for some other photographs. The Americans and the British began just round-the-clock bombing of German cities, also major cities that were industrial cities, and Czechoslovakia and Romania too. But we just literally pounded these cities here with aerial bombing. This is a photograph of Cologne in 1945. That city's been rebuilt. The cathedral in the background, it had some damage, but it was not destroyed during the Allied bombing runs. And let's see if I can find a couple of others here. beautiful church that is present there in Dresden. We bombed Dresden. It had no military value whatsoever. 135,000 civilians lost their lives. Here's a photograph of the same church. That photograph over here is the same church after the bombing there. If you read Kurt Vonnegut's book, Slaughterhouse 5, that's what it deals with. Since that time, here's Dresden after it was bombed by the Allies, February 1945. That church that I showed you a minute ago been rebuilt. That's what it looks like today. Beautiful, beautiful church. It's called the Frauenkirchen. If you translate that, that means like the woman's church. All right, here's a photograph of the same church. Notice the large statue there, Martin Luther. And that's Martin Luther's statue, Lutheran Church, if I remember right anyway. Okay, so let's see if there was anything else. I don't like to keep you folks over 50 minutes, and we're right at 50 minutes now. But let's see what else. Here's just very briefly here. All right, in the meantime, we will firebomb Tokyo. In February 1945, we firebombed Tokyo. 80,000 people died in that firebombing in February 1945. 185,000 people were injured. There were 267,000 buildings that was destroyed there in Tokyo itself. All right, so that's pretty good timing here, folks. I'm about 50 and a half minutes, and that's a good place for us to stop there. We still got to end the war with Japan, and you know what I'm talking about with that. Now, one of the things we're going to discover as we and the British are moving through places like the Netherlands and Germany, and the Soviets are finding when they go through Poland, and when we're going through Germany, we're going to find some evidences of mass atrocities here. What I'm talking about, this is a Holocaust, and we'll be addressing that topic the next time we get together. It's a long topic, many videos here, and some of those videos are quite disturbing for you folks. So anyway, we'll use a little bit of discretion with that. All righty, keep up with the material here, folks. We are getting kind of close to our third examination, and shortly after that will be the final examination. Thank you.